Our app here is looking pretty good. We can drag around, get the weather wherever we want, make our API request, definitely behaving the way that we want it to. There's a couple things I want to review before we finish up this entire section. First, the map view. We didn't actually write a map view from scratch. We just asked React Native to make it for us. React Native, in turn, didn't actually implement the map. They just borrowed it from the native operating system. So this is a very common theme throughout React Native. For probably, 90% of the apps that people want to build, we don't really need to rewrite widgets from scratch. Instead, we can learn how to reuse existing widgets to build the apps that we want. I personally couldn't imagine building a map widget like this. That would be a tremendous undertaking. So whenever possible, we want to make sure to delegate to existing code where possible. It really just speeds up our development process terrifically. Secondly, the map view itself has two very important concepts: annotations and region change callbacks. We used annotations as basically pins. Although our map view only has one pin, the map view can handle many more, and we would just provide the other pins by adding to this array that we pass to annotations. The region change callbacks on region change complete right here is used to handle whenever the user scrolls or moves or zooms, basically interacts with the map in some form. We use the on region change callback, on region change complete, but there's also another one called on region change, no complete, just on region change, which is fired repeatedly as the user drags on the map. So you can kind of imagine if I start to do this, it's like firing, 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 so on and so on. We could have used that callback instead of the complete one right here to get our data, but we decided to go with the on region change complete because otherwise we would have just issued a tremendous number of API requests. One thing that you always need to be very conscious about when developing mobile applications is to limit the number of requests as much as possible. When a user is on a desktop or a laptop, you can kind of assume that they're probably on Wi-Fi or a wired connection, and it's ideally it's probably a pretty speedy connection, right? On a mobile device, on the other hand, people might be using 3G or 2G, for all we know, to connect to some backend to serve your application or to serve data for your application. And we don't really have any good idea of what the bandwidth is available. And so whenever possible, we want to try to constrict or restrict or throttle in some fashion the number of requests that we're making. The next thing I want to talk about is fetch. So fetch is an extremely important API, and it's something that we're going to use in just about every app going forward from here. It's really you can kind of think of it as our window to the world. It's our ability to reach out beyond just the mobile device and make some request. We use fetch by building a second helper module here, the API module in our code. I always very highly recommend pulling any request logic, anything that looks like a URL or handling a response or JSON, always pull that out of your components. The benefit to this is that if we had some other component that wanted to make a similar request, we could just include the API module and poof, there we go. If all that logic sat inside of our component right here, well, that would get really messy really quick. So we always want to try to keep that logic outside of our component. Next thing about fetch always returns a promise. And we spoke about how to work with a promise with the response.json a little bit in here. This is something that's very important to remember. Whenever you work with fetch, the first then that we attached gets a response that is just, we can't immediately use it. It's not workable right away. So instead, you have to call response.json, return it, and chain on a second then. The second then is where we actually get our usable data back here. I know it's a funny little requirement. It's something I don't care for that much, but it's the tools we have available to us right now. So with all this in mind, I really hope you enjoyed building this application. I hope you view this app right here, although it was kind of simple in scope, it really was something to really open up the ability to make requests. That's something that every section here going forward is going to hinge upon. And so I want to make sure that we had a very clear, very focused example on how to make requests. If you feel like any of the process around making a network request is unclear, I really encourage you to drop me an email or post a comment on the course. Just let me know if you have any questions. If you had any problems with your code, always remember to try to post your code on GitHub, because almost always the first thing I'm going to ask you if it's a troubleshooting request is, I need to be able to see your code. So again, if you have any issues around the request logic in here, please don't hesitate to drop me a line. So with all that in mind, I'll catch you in the next section.